Dr. Schuller, when I came up to North America and I see him with his hour of power and so on and his strategies, etc., I looked at this thing and I'm not surprising that, he ended up, the church bankrupt and he's ended up like sort of disgraced. You see, we as humans, we think that church is our thing, but churches really belong to God. See, He's supposed to be the author and finisher of our faith, and He's the one who's supposed to be in charge of the church. But a lot of times people think that, oh, I'm so smart, I'm gonna, run the show. But when you look at, Dr. Schuller's program, it looked as if it was just a kind of strategy, and it was based generally on Dr. Vincent Peale positive thinking. You come up with write down some nice choice words and come up with some nice illustrations and so on, but you never felt as if it were a kind of like church. You just feel as if it's like a lecture. Maybe it's a university or something like that. But even a university and a lecture, if it's spiritual, it comes over better than even his presentations. So I'm not surprised at the situation he got himself in, because religion is not positive thinking. It may look as if it's positive thinking, but it's not. People could wish anything and work hard and do whatever they want, but if God is not behind it, it's not going to work. And so it's a shame to see how his big ministry has ended. I recall when I was in Florida, I hooked into something that was happening in Toronto. You had a preacher came in from Florida. He said that he went to university and he did literature. And he came up with the small groups concept. And what he did was, you had small groups, say like 8 people, and you had a group leader. Now he promised the group leader, man, listen, if you bring a lot of people in here and if you are instrumental in this church growing, you're going to get a position. In other words, we're going to start churches everywhere, and you're going to come to a place where you could be the minister somewhere, and that goes say a lot. You're going to have a certain quality of life, you're going to have a job, a check, car, nice girl, nice life, the whole 9 yards. And so they were working hard, and you never knew where they were meeting. Now it was a part of the strategy, but also they were growing so rapid that there's no one place that they could be at. Say they started off at 50, and if everybody went out and invited a friend, so you have 100 the next week, and then 200 next week, and keep going like that. Of course, not doubling per se, but that's a strategy they were using. And it looked as if it's a good model, but this small groups thing came from hell. It's a strategy that the Antichrist and his people have come up with. Because you see, all my friends are not necessarily the people that I need to invite to church. I am supposed to be working with God and ask God, Lord, who do you would like me to invite to your church? And He's going to tell you, invite this one here, invite this one here. Why? Because these people are seeking Him. He knows they're communicating with Him and saying, Lord, 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 I need to serve you, I want yada, yada, yada. And because He has established you, He's going to hook you up with these people. And if you're in tune with Him, you're going to invite them over. But that doesn't mean necessarily that everyone in the group might have a friend who really is seeking like that. But they would say, hey man, come over and see what we have here, bro. You might like it, man. And they have games where you're going to listen to them, what they have to say, and say, oh, that was a good point, that's good, I like that. And then you see the nice girls over there, them university girls, and back to them professionals and all that stuff, and studying like, if I could get one of them, I'm good. So man, this thing was moving phenomenally. But in real terms, the preacher didn't know what he was talking about. Because literature doesn't necessarily mean that you could preach or you understand scripture. Scripture is not literature. It's an inspired book. And studies in theology help a lot. Now, God inspires you when you study theology and you're able to do well. But it doesn't mean because you haven't studied theology, you may not get the inspiration. But also, many people would think that they'll get inspiration, but they don't. Because we see where Peter and Paul and these people, Paul was a big scholar, Peter was just a fisherman, and he has done some yeoman work in religion. We see God had called him. And people miss this point, that Even Paul was persecuting Christians. Some people who are, I know some guys in college, they lived a life that nobody would expect them to want to be a minister. But they say, look at Paul. Paul is not you, you're not Paul. Because Paul was, he was in church from early. He knew the scriptures, he studied it, and what he was doing is what God had asked him to do, persecute the Gentiles. But when the system ended, and it changed now from Judaism to whosoever will, he wasn't aware of that, because he had been caught up into the works and into the misunderstanding of the times, and he didn't understand that this Jesus was the one that was promised in the whole 9 yards, and that he came and he smashed Judaism and he opened it up now to people who follow in Jesus, and not the Mosaic thing and the temple and so forth. And even with Peter, although he was a fisherman, he too had been a Jew. He had done the bar mitzvah, I'm sure. He knew the 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, and he had been living a certain lifestyle, but somewhere along the line he fell away. And he had a reawakening in his life. Christ called him, and that experience that he had came back. He was paying tithe. He knew what the Sabbath day was. He believed we should be married. He believed in the whole Bible, but just for some reason he fell away. Or perhaps he was disenchanted by the behavior of the so-called religious people. So that's a big difference. Now, with the preacher guy up there, he would say things like, and in the days of these kings, so shit happened. And simply because we don't have kings today, he's saying that this thing had to be fulfilled when there were kings. Well, we still have kings, and they're not the executive kings like in the past, but Prince Charles is going to be a king, and William is going to be a king. All right. And so far we have queens out there in Europe. This prince guy in Monaco, I think he might be a king already or whatever. You know what I mean? But predominantly we're presidents and prime ministers and coup leaders and communists and all that kind of stuff. So he's thinking that's way back then. And that's just one of the mistakes he's making. He doesn't understand the scripture. And I think Mr. Schuller too don't seem to have understood the scripture. I don't know what his doctorate is in or what kind of student he was, but I never found him very inspirational and so forth. So now this ministry crash, I'm not surprised. And there are a lot of others out there that playing games and laughter and nice, games and little coffee in the end and shaking hands and kissing and hugging and all this kind of games coming up. Eventually they're going to fall away, because unless God has called you, in other words, if God has not started your church, you can't take people to lead them back to God. All right, you're going to lead them to where whoever started you. Okay, so when God started a church, He's starting it so that this church is going to bring fruits or people to Him. See, I'm not sure where the people in the church were going to or whatever, but I'm not rejoicing that it happened, because He's a soul just like all of us that need God and so forth. But these games that they play, they're psychological games, and then tricks like they're spiritual and all them games that the Antichrist get into play, are they all going to fail?